Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm John, and I've got a book haul video for you today. Now, I did not expect to make a book haul video today, and I did not expect to have a book haul today, but I had to take my mom to a doctor's appointment today in Lexington, and I stopped at a Goodwill, and then she and I went to a bookstore together. I've been looking for a copy of Red Dragon by Thomas Harris for almost a month now, and I have not seen a copy. I saw one hardcover copy that was really expensive, but I've never had so much trouble finding a copy of a Thomas Harris book in my life. Uh, I'll find one. It's not, imperative or anything, but I read Silence of the Lambs about a month ago, maybe a little more now, and I've been wanting to go back to Red Dragon. Thomas Harris is a really great, really interesting writer, and I haven't read those books since I was like 15 or 16, so I've been wanting to return to them. I didn't find them today. That's my point. I didn't find them today, but I found some other books, and I have actually picked up a few more books over the last couple of weeks, but the majority of them I found today. So I think I'll just dive right into it. I'm not exactly in the groove of making videos right now, so if this is kind of discordant, I apologize, but I really need to get back into the flow of making videos. Okay, here we go. So there are quite a few. There's a couple that are nonfiction. The majority of them are fiction. And I'll be sure to point out which ones I got, when, and such. So the first four are books that I got over the past several weeks. They're not books that I picked up today. So they're both by a guy named Bart Davis. They are submarine novels, and I was hoping to kind of get to one of these for Garb August. It's the 28th now. I don't know if I'm going to. I read a lot of trash for Garb August, and I have kind of I've kind of stuffed myself full of trash for a little while. It was fun though. So this is Atlantic Run, and the next one is Raise the Red Dawn. These were really cheap. I think these were $2 a piece, and sometimes submarine novels are really, really good, and sometimes they're really, really awful. These may be either. You never know until you start them. Let's see. Here is one I kind of debated with myself whether or not to get, but it was $1.59. I got it at a Goodwill. Most of these I got at Goodwill for $1.59 each. So it is The Rise of the Roman Empire by Polybius, and I've heard other people talk about this book, and I have quite a few of these Penguin classics, nonfiction classics, and I do intend to get to them someday. It's just, the way that I read is something will interest me, and I'll pick it up and I'll read it. But trying to make TBRs is just trying to get myself to read books in a certain period of time on a set schedule. It just does not work for me. But it's something I want to point out too about book hauls that I do personally. I'm building a library for the rest of my life. I've been buying books since I was about 11 or 12 regularly, and I'm trying to get books that I'm going to keep with me the rest of my life, and that I'll be reading for the rest of my life. So when a book like this comes along, I might read this 5 years from now. I might read it 5 days from now. I might read it 15 years from now. But it will be on the shelf. And the truth of the matter is, a book like this is probably not one that I'm going to jump up and drive out of the house and go off to find. It's much more likely for me to read this book if I have it close at hand. And so for $1.59, why not? A lot of these books nowadays like this, people are buying them and selling them for outrageous prices, or they're winding up in dumpsters. So the way I looked at it, I saved it for $1.59. Okay, and here is one that is apparently part of a really long series, and I didn't know that, and I'm not sure if that makes any difference, honestly. This is A Test to Destruction by Henry Williamson. I'd never heard of this before. It is a novel of World War I on the front and at home, and I think this is semi-autobiographical, actually. I read the little introduction here, not completely, but that seems really interesting. So this is from, I don't think this is from that time. Okay, this is from 1977, or no, it was published in 1960. It was copyrighted in 77 by Henry Williamson's estate. Okay, so these are, I think we are now to the books that I got today. So there are quite a few of them. Most of them I got for $1.59. There were a couple that were $5 each, and I'll talk about them when I get to them and why I spent $5 on them. So the first one is The Fury by John Farris. And this is the first John Farris book that I have ever owned. It's only the second that I have ever seen. And I've heard about Farris. You know, I grew up reading horror, and I have heard of Farris for years and years. I think he wrote All Heads Turn When the Hunt Goes By, and I've never seen that in person. I've heard mixed things about his books, but this was cheap, and I've never seen it before, and I know they made a movie about this, and I don't really know much about it. Somebody read this recently and didn't care for it, but I think it was because his taste didn't run towards this kind of book, if I remember right. The next is The Ghost of Flight 401. This is a supposedly true story by John G. Fuller. So if you don't know what Flight 401 was, in I think the 70s, there was an airliner going from, like, I can't remember exactly where. Let's see. It's not going to tell me, I don't think. Well, anyway, it did a nosedive into the Florida Everglades, and most of the people on board were killed. And instead of completely scrapping it, they took the usable parts and they farmed them out and put them on other aircraft. And supposedly the airplanes with the parts from the destroyed Flight 401 were haunted. And they would see ghosts on these other planes to the point where they had to take the parts back off of the planes. Now, the thing is, this is going to be one of those books where I doubt the author cites their sources. And so they could just have been making this up all the way through. Yeah, so, and whether you think ghosts are real or not, I think it would be an interesting book, and it was $1. So it's not like and it fits into Garb August, which is rapidly approaching its end, unfortunately, for this year. But, you know, I could always read it for October, Halloween and whatnot. So here is The Search for the Gold of Tutankhamen by Arnold C. Brackman. This is the story of finding Tutankhamun's tomb and the people involved. And, this book has been sitting at my bookstore, for my local bookstore, not my bookstore, but, the local bookstore, for a couple of weeks. And very cheap, $2. And it is an interesting thing. I mean, how did they find the tomb? What went on? How did they open it? Who were the people involved? I've never really been all that interested, but I don't know. It just kind of struck my fancy today. This next one is a little strange. I was glad to find it. It is Grave Humor by Alonzo C. Hall. And this is all about epitaphs on tombstones in graveyards. So there is Mr. Hall, and apparently he liked to go and walk around graveyards and read the inscriptions, and he would write them down. And some of them are really interesting. I have, here in town I live in, our cemetery goes back about 300 years. And so it's really neat to go to the cemetery here and see. Some of them are like trees with the branches cut off, and some of them are marble, and they're beautiful. I'd love to walk through there someday and take video of it, or just pictures or something. It's really interesting. And there are some Civil War graves and things like that. Let's see. You can never find a really interesting one when you want to, can you? Here he lies as he always did. Some of them are really funny. Some of them are really sad. It's really interesting that people took the time to chisel out some of these inscriptions. And some of them are kind of insulting to the dead person. Here lies Cynthia, Stephen's wife. She lived 6 years in calms and strife. Death came at last and set her free. I was glad, and so was she. So it's hard to imagine someone putting that on a headstone today. First and last wife of Thomas Phillips, talked to death by friends. None of the inscriptions on the tombstones in the cemetery where I live are quite that interesting. They're actually just kind of sad, most of them, or just rather neutral, just dates and names. So, okay. So I'm guessing for most of these next three, probably somebody passed away because there were a bunch of first edition hardcovers from the 60s and 70s. I got the ones that interested me, and that's always kind of sad, but when I pass on, I hope that my books will go to people who appreciate them, such as myself, and not into a dumpster. So this is a first printing of the Confessions of Nat Turner by William Styron. I've never read any fiction by Styron. There he is. And this is about Nat Turner, who was a slave, and in the 1830s he led a slave rebellion. I don't know much about that. I don't know how much of history this is based on or anything. I'd really like to look into that before I read this book, if I ever do get around to reading this book. Like I said, my reading is very haphazard. So this is from 1967. And if I remember right, there was a lot of controversy over this book when it was first published. I don't know if that just has to do with the time period in which it was published. I did read a book by William Styron. It was called, I don't remember what it was called. It was a little short nonfiction book about his depression. And it was okay. I was looking over here because I have a book by him right here called This Quiet Dust, which is a collection of essays. There's a bookcase over here. So the next is one that I've kind of been looking for a while, for about a year. I don't know why, because it's not really in my normal book reading area. It is Airport by Arthur Hailey, and there is Arthur Hailey and his family, and this is a big 1960s epic. Arthur Hailey wrote books about, he wrote one called Hotel, I think, and he wrote one, I can't remember what his book about a hospital is called. It may have just been called Hospital. He wrote one about a TV news station. I think that was called the Evening News or TV News. I'm not sure. But this is a big epic about all these people who work in the airlines, at the airport, in the airplanes, the pilots, the stewardesses, I'm sure the janitors, the people running the place. This is not my normal kind of reading because I usually don't like these big epic stories, but for some reason I have been wanting to read Airport, and this is the first copy in a year that I have seen. What's irritating about that to me is that I used to see this book all over the place all the time, and then when I started looking for it, I couldn't find it at all. I would find other books like Wheels. He wrote a book called Wheels. I would find the one about the hospital, the one about the news station, but never Airport. Which that is an interesting cover too. Just that runway there with all the rubber marks on it. Not what I expected, actually. Here is, let me go on to this is another one from that same collection. This is Cornelius Ryan's A Bridge Too Far. I've already read this book. I actually have this copy. The difference between the one I have and this one is that mine doesn't have the dust jacket, and this was only $1. So I just thought that I would take my old copy and sell it and, you know, have one with a nice cover. There's Cornelius Ryan. And this is about the invasion of Arnhem by the British, and so let's see, they were going to, so the Nazis had occupied, let me see, I know Arnhem is in, it's not in the Netherlands, is it? No, it's in Belgium. Holland, yes, okay, it's in Holland. Right, that I get that kind of confused, that little area there, but the Nazis had occupied Holland and Belgium, and Montgomery came up with this plan to drop all these paratroopers into the area, and they needed to take 3 bridges in a row, and it turned into this just complete slog, this battle, I mean, it was just for day after day after day, and at the time it was the largest assembly of airplanes in history, and the way that Ryan explains, you know, these people seeing these planes go overhead for just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them was very, very interesting. And I think that was actually, anyway, I lost my train of thought, I'm sorry. But I don't, it's been a while since I've read this. It's been 6 or 7 years since I've read this. It was really good. I enjoyed it. And this is just a replacement for my old copy. And the next 2 were $5 a piece, and I felt justified in that because the first book was $15 for about a year, and I looked at it and I wanted it, and I just wasn't going to give $15 for it, but I would give $5 for it. It is Lonely Vigil by Walter Lord, Coast Watchers of the Solomons. So this is about the coast watchers in World War II and how they lived with the native people, and they lived on these occupied islands and occupied by the Japanese, and they would spot the ships coming through and that kind of thing, airplanes, and radio it in and other things like that. And it's kind of an untold story until Walter Lord told the story. It's kind of, I like this picture because this is him in, let's see, Guadalcanal. So he's been wandering through the jungle with his guides, and his guides look like they're just fine, but Walter Lord looks like he has maybe had a touch of some kind of virus or something. He looks like he's had a rough time. But anyway, I really, really like Walter Lord's books. I recently read one called Miracle at Dunkirk that was really good. I haven't talked about it on the channel yet. I wasn't exactly sure what to say about it. I have kind of been having a hard time talking about books lately, not knowing exactly how to go about it, and they piled up until I had about 19 books on the stack, and it was a little bit overwhelming. I didn't know where to start, and so I just haven't talked about some of those books, and I apologize for that. Lord wrote A Night to Remember about the Titanic. He wrote Miracle at Dunkirk. He wrote The Good Years, which was one of my favorite books of last year. It was a chronicle of, like, from 1900 until I think 1914, and just the events of those years, the big events in American history of those years. Really, really good book. I'm not interested in those years. Like, they kind of tend to bore me, but Walter Lord made them really interesting to me, and I've been wanting to read all his books since then. He wrote one about Pearl Harbor, I know, and he wrote one about the Alamo. Both of those I have found. The one about Pearl Harbor is usually easy to find and cheaper. I just haven't found it yet. The one about the Alamo tends to be kind of expensive, like they wanted $15 for this one. When I saw a paperback of his book about the Alamo, it was also $15 for an old, like, I don't think it'll take a reading kind of paperback. And I'm just not willing to give that. I'll find one cheaper. And this is the last book. It's kind of boring to look at because the dust jacket is gone. It is Oliver Wiswell by Kenneth Roberts. And this is a novel about From what I understand, I read a little bit of it here and there while I was looking at it. I've got several Kenneth Roberts books. He wrote several books about the American Revolution. So I have one right up here on this shelf called, I think it's called Rabble in Arms. And then there's one right over here, which is a paperback called Arundel. And I think that's in a series. From what I understand, this book is about a loyalist, which is really interesting because in the United States, we're not really taught about the loyalists, like the loyalists to Britain and what they thought and what they desired and what they thought about, what their country was going through and what happened to them and how they were treated before and after the war. So this is really interesting to me. In fact, this is, I think, the most interesting of them to me that I have so far. And I really need to read these. I'm not a huge fan of historical fiction, really, but I've heard really, really, really good things about Kenneth Roberts. I just haven't got around to reading his books. And this is really interesting because it has, well, there's my price sticker, but it has maps. And so, what's this say? Thomas Buell's map of loyal Long Island, 1776 to 1783, to show Howe's victory over the rebels at Brooklyn, August 27th, 1776, and the capture of New York, September 15th, 1776. I have to admit that I don't think most Americans realize how long the American Revolution actually went on for. It was several years. And I think we were just kind of taught about 1776, and we all started to think that the war lasted a couple of years, when in reality it lasted close to a decade, if I remember right. So, yeah, that is the last book. That is, and I would love to read more about the American Revolution because I think it involved really interesting characters on both sides. But for some reason, it tends to put me to sleep to read about the American Revolution, and I don't know why. I'm ashamed to say that. But, oh, and speaking of that, speaking of Walter Lord, I have a book right over here that I got not too long ago by Walter Lord called Dawn's Early Light, which is about the War of 1812. So that, I just wanted to throw that in there, another book that Walter Lord wrote. So anyway, I'm rambling now, and this has gone on for 24 minutes. And yes, okay, I want to apologize for that, but I sometimes like to get on the camera and just ramble, and some people like it and some people don't. And hey, this is my channel and I'll ramble if I want to. But anyway, I want to thank you for joining me. I'd love to hear your thoughts about these books. Let me know if you've read any of them. I'd love to hear about like Kenneth Roberts in particular, because I have several of his books now, and I really want to read them. And I'd really like to hear if people liked them. I know lots of people have liked them, and I think that I probably would too. Let's see, can we do a pyramid? I don't know. I might throw my back out here or something. Make sure the cat's out of the way so I don't drop it. He's right over there. You can't see him, but he is right here. And I actually came back here and turned on the lights, and I interrupted his sleep, his midday or mid-afternoon sleep, and he's not particularly happy about it. But he's a good cat, and he tolerates me very well, and he's very well behaved. So there are my books from my unexpected book haul. And like I said, I want to thank you for joining me today, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'll see you next time.